Okay, well, I am thrilled to have our speaker with us tonight. I'm really excited to hear what's been going on with our friend. And to introduce our speaker, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Kathy P.
Thank you, Maggie. Hello, friends. I'm Kathy. I'm an alcoholic from snowy Denver. It's wonderful to see you, warm Florida to Akron, Ohio, to North Carolina and wherever else. It is a joy for me to introduce my dear friend, Erica. One of the things that it says, and I don't know what page it's on, but the joys that we have in watching somebody else's recovery. It's been a while. I watched this college co-ed coming to Boulder for graduate school, and we were a part of this women's meeting, Chicks at Six. It was a hoot. And all of these young women trying to get sober and figure themselves out, and where do they fit in the world. And I don't know ever as a sponsor what I offer, but I do know actually what people offer me. And every time I work with somebody and I take them through the steps, I can't help but have my own spiritual awakening as I watch them have theirs. And so there have been many of them as I've watched Erica walk this hard path and get bumped around by life and health and what have you, and land on her feet. And here we are across the country, but not very far from my heart. Love you, Erica. Would look forward to your share tonight, my friend.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Maggie. And thanks, Veronica. I'm Erica. I'm an alcoholic. Really glad to be with you tonight. Actually, it's 20 years ago this week that I actually asked Kathy to sponsor me after arriving in Boulder. So that's quite a long time to be involved in each other's recovery and each other's lives. So when I asked Maggie, how does one share what it's like now for 50 to 60 minutes? She said, that the conscience of this group is that people do share a bit about like what's going on with them and how they're trying to apply the tools and the spiritual principles of our program, and the things that are hard in life today. And so assuming that is what the group would like, I thought I might start first by just sharing a little bit about how I got to where I am. And then I'll tell you maybe a little bit about where I am and what's going on and how my higher power and I are working on it. So I came to AA when I was 21, and I was living in Dayton, Ohio. Like Kathy said, I was a college student at the time. I'd been drinking for already a number of years by that point, and was dying of alcoholism by the time I came to AA. And the way that I was introduced to AA was through my roommates who were not in the program, but they had been seeking counsel from the campus ministry about my drinking for months. And the campus ministry counselors had introduced them to a priest on the campus who was an AA member. And he coached them in how to practice the 12th step indirectly. And he told them exactly what it says in the book in chapter 7. He said, ask Erica if she wants to stop drinking one night when she comes in and looks miserable. And if she says yes, then tell her that you've been talking with someone who no longer drinks. And part of what he does to stay sober is talk to other people who want to stop drinking, and then ask her if she wants to meet with me. And so that's exactly what they did. I came home one night drunk without wanting to be drunk again. And they were waiting, and they asked me if I wanted to stop. And believe it or not, it was the first time anybody had ever asked me that. A lot of people had suggested I stop or moderate, especially. A lot of people had mentioned they were worried about my lack of other coping skills. they mention all the things they talk about in the doctor's opinion in the book, like, you're clearly drinking to escape. Maybe you're mentally ill, like, all of those things, which, may have been true, but weren't the whole story. And so nobody said anything about what I should do this time. They asked me if I wanted to stop. And in that moment of grace, I said yes. And they said, well, we've been meeting with someone who is an alcoholic. He stopped drinking and he is willing to meet with you and tell you how if you want to meet him. And so the next day, and you know, like a garden variety alcoholic, I took the bait. And the next day I was sitting in this fellow's living room. And I was not, I'm not Catholic, wasn't raised Catholic. So I didn't really know all what it meant to be a priest, but he described to me that he'd been a priest for 40 years and he'd only been sober for 20 years. So he'd been a drunk priest for the first 20 years. And he came to AA because he was drinking and driving. And he almost killed a family in a car accident. And that was sort of his bottom spiritually as well. And so he found his way into AA and worked the steps and, you know, had a powerful experience and was able to stay sober. And he said that it's a really amazing thing to have been a priest with no God, and then now to be an AA member with a connection with the power greater than myself, and how different my life is now. And I didn't really know what to make of that part of it, except that I could tell when he was talking to me about his drinking, that it wasn't bothering him to talk about it. Like he was describing exactly how I felt when I drank, and he was describing how I felt when I couldn't drink, or when I got kicked out of a place and I felt that craving inside me. And he had had that same stuff. And what I could tell from how he was speaking to me is that he wasn't fighting at all the desire to drink. And I'd never seen somebody describe what I had and look free. Because when I woke up every morning, I felt like I was going to fight for my life all day. So there was definitely something that was attractive about him. And I took his suggestion to go to my first AA meeting. And, you know, I went to a men's meeting and was half an hour late, and they were reading the 12 and 12 when I walked in. And they did a silent group conscience, I now know, and closed their 12 and 12s, and then went around the room and did the 3-minute pitch one by one. And again, they were describing how I drank and how I felt about drinking, how I thought about alcohol. But they looked like they were doing okay. So I asked one of them afterward what I should do. And he said, why don't you stay on for the youngsters meeting that's starting in a half an hour in the same room? So I went to the Friday night young people's meeting in Dayton, Ohio, and in walks this guy from my class on campus who was like one of my least favorite people at school. And the reason he was one of my least favorite people is because he always blew me off when I invited him to my parties. And he sat behind me in class, and I just thought he was really smug. And it turns out that he'd been sober 8 years, and he'd gotten sober when he was 13. So he was sitting through those classes, not going to any of the keg parties, instead going to the youngsters meetings 20 miles away. And he didn't, you know, he respected the fact that I was clearly embarrassed to see him. But I didn't talk to him or anything. And basically, I didn't put it together that the reason he was so smug is because he was sober yet. That took me until I was like 5 years sober to realize that. But anyway, I kept going to that young people's meeting for about 3 months. And at the end of that 3 months, I was going to blow my brains out because the only thing I was doing is going to the one meeting a week. And then between that, I was like coming home from school, putting on pajamas, ordering in a pizza, and playing sad songs on my guitar to myself. And, you know, for me, I'm telling you this part of the story because this is basically like who I am, you know, who I am in alcoholism. And it still is, right? Like I left to my own devices, what I want to do is just kind of come home, isolate, put on my most comfortable clothes, eat my feelings, and distract myself with something that is very self-indulgent, like playing sad songs or watching a movie on loop or whatever. So anyway, needless to say, though, as somebody with 90 days or so of sobriety, this wasn't going to work. And I just kind of came to that crisis point that they talk about where I couldn't live that way, but I also couldn't drink anymore. And I just felt like I wanted to die, really. And I went to this conference in Washington, D.C., which was my first trip sober. And I was real nervous about going. And, you know, there was a big speech in a big ballroom in a hotel or convention center or something. And the speech started, and I just got kind of gripped by that anxiety. And then this really calm kind of feeling came over me. And it was this just total resignation and this quiet voice saying, you can end it. And so I started to leave the room to figure out how to do that. And I bumped into this dude, and he turned around, and it was the guy Todd from the youngsters meeting in Dayton. And he was there in the same room in Washington, D.C. at the same event. Couldn't believe it. And he looked at me. I'm sure I looked like I was a deer in headlights. And he said, "How are you doing?" And I said, "I'm not doing well, man. I feel like I'm about to die." And he said, "Well, why don't you just hang out with me for the rest of the weekend? And when we get home, I'll get you some help." So he handed me a number on a piece of paper. And it was for this woman named Angie, who I was really in. Sorry, I'm sick. So I might have to mute and cough every once in a while. It was this woman, Angie, who I was really intimidated by. And I didn't want to call her. She was like the last person in the room I wanted to call because she was this person who was real hardcore and would share in the meetings big truths. And I just felt like she was going to be hard on me, which was accurate. But anyway, I did call her. And I told her, you know, my situation. And she said, "Yeah, I remember which one you are." And I said, "Well, I'm just trying to, I'm wondering if you might sponsor me. And I'm just not having I'm not having a good way about myself here." And she said, "Well, are you willing to go to any lengths to stay sober? Because I don't work with people who aren't." And I thought that was real mean, you know. And I said, "Well, what do you mean by any lengths?" And she described it, and it's still kind of the basics. It's still the fundamental foundation of my program now. It's the same stuff that Kathy has me do now. And what it is she said, you need to go to more than one meeting a week for sure. So try to get to 3 meetings a week. We're going to meet once a week and read the book together and work the steps together. You're going to get a home group and a service position at the group. And I suggest that you go on your knees and ask your higher power to help you stay sober just for this 24-hour period. And she gave me a really specific prayer, which was to ask my higher power to give me a defense against the first drink just for today, or be my defense against the first drink just for today. And she said, if you're willing to do those things, then I'm willing to work with you. And so we did start to work together. And our first meeting, I'll tell you, is important actually in my kind of sobriety and recovery life, because we actually started by looking at the traditions. And the reason this came to pass is because when and this tells you still a little bit more about who I am still. When we sat down for our first meeting, I actually arrived about 15 minutes earlier than the appointed time at the Denny's that she told me to meet her at. And when I got there, I'd gotten my brand new 4th edition big book straight out of the box, because that thing went into circulation like October, November of 2001. So my group proudly had one of the fresh boxes of the new 4th edition. They popped one out and the guy handed me one, and I just felt like I got the newest of the new. And it had that blue and yellow dust jacket cover on it. It said in big letters, Alcoholics Anonymous on the front and on the side. And so I got there to that Denny's, and I took my big book and I put it like right on the edge of the table. And I did that. I wasn't self-aware enough to really know why I did that. But the reason I did it was to solicit sympathy from the waitress and the other patrons at the Denny's. You know, I wanted them to see the book and be like, look at that poor child. Look what society has done to that person. And my sponsor came in like 15 minutes later. I'm sitting there nursing, you know, my cup of high test coffee. She comes in and is like, she looks at the book and goes, you need to put a cover on that. That was the first thing she said to me at our first one-on-one. And I was like, she said, in fact, you can even flip it around. The inside is white and it's just blank. You should do that now. So I sat down and I, you know, turned it inside out, flipped it around. And she said, you know, there's a few things that you need to know about anonymity. The first thing is that you never have the right to break anybody else's anonymity. And by putting that book out there, like we're associated together and there's that book, you break my anonymity by implication. You're never allowed to do that without permission. And then the second piece is that you broke your anonymity publicly to all these people, and you're not in a position to represent AA to any of these people right now. And so you just need to know what the 11th tradition is about. And so we're actually going to start with the 12 and 12. And I want you to read the essay on tradition 11 and tradition 12 with a laser focus on the principle of anonymity as humility and self-sacrifice. And that was my first assignment. And the thing is that this was like a really important lesson for me for lots of reasons. First is I wasn't nearly as reckless with my anonymity again. But the second thing is that there was so much truth in what she was saying. It was like it just cut through my ego and hit exactly to surfacing my real motives in a way that really nobody had ever been able to do with me before. You know, I'm pretty prone to arrogance and also self-justification. And like those things were really worked out pretty well for me by the time I came to AA. And, you know, she told me what my motives were to myself, my real motives, and was correct, you know? And so it really was liberating in a way. And also I started to trust her, you know, with my life and with going through the process. So let me move ahead to get more current quickly. But first, I just want to say that by the time I got through the 12 steps with that first sponsor, you know, I was about 9 months sober and moving to Colorado, which is where I met so many of you wonderful people. And so my first sponsor told me that if I didn't get a new sponsor and a home group and a service job within the first week of getting there, that I'd probably drink again. And so when I arrived in Boulder as a grad student, I really started going to lots of meetings and got a home group, Chicks at Six, and, you know, got a new sponsor. And when I asked Kathy to sponsor me, I don't know if you remember this, Kathy, but she asked me if I was working with others yet. And I said, well, no, I've got less than a year of sobriety. And she said, it doesn't really matter if you have less than a year, if you've been through the 12 steps. If you're not working with others, you missed the boat. And I was like, oh, well, she said, why don't you work with others and then we can work together. So then I went out and tried to, you know, work with others and got some sponsees. And I think that's really when my recovery, my emotional recovery started. So was carrying the message to others, because it was much easier to try to practice these principles in all my affairs when I was practicing carrying the message to other alcoholics. So anyway, a lot has gone on. I mean, I've basically grown up. I'm now 42. So half of my life, I've been growing up in AA, and all of the mistakes that I've made as an adult, I've made in AA in front of everybody. So in fact, in front of lots of people here, you know, like all of my mistakes were made in AA in front of people and fully narrated along the way. And that's humbling too, but also comforting. You know, my mind goes to some of my first like big emotional bottoms, and how the same tools that got me through at those times are the same ones that I turn to now. I remember there was a really bad weekend. And I was probably about a year and a half sober. And there was some drama happening at Chicks at Six. And there was this woman that I had been dating, my first ever girlfriend, and first ever person that had actually wanted to date me. And then also, therefore, the first person who'd ever wanted to dump me, did dump me. And this happened like the same weekend that, I went negative in my bank account. There was a boot put on my car in the parking lot of my apartment complex. And, I show up at this Chicks at Six meeting and there's some drama, and boy, talk about lack of emotional sobriety. I was the person in that meeting who threw the chair across the room, right? Like, I thought I was the one who was on the right side of the argument, but I was also the one throwing the chair across the room. So, it was like maximal experience from all directions of not knowing how to play with others and get along with others. And at that point, there was just this like raw emotional pain. Like when I was a real little kid, I would have these experiences too of just feeling these like deep wells of sorrow and loneliness, and then here I was like a year and a half sober, thinking I'm doing everything right, and just having this deep well of sorrow and loneliness and like pain, just like emotional pain all the time. And, some of that is just being a really young person who was immature and had basically no life skills, still had trouble speaking, like in meetings and speaking in public and all that stuff, and was very overwhelmed by everything in life, but and didn't know how to get along with others at all. But part of it too was that I didn't have a full toolkit yet. I wasn't exposed to all of the spiritual principles. And so Kathy asked me to come to this area assembly in Denver. And so I tagged along with her, having nothing else to do and no car to roll around in. And we went to this area assembly, and, I remember very vividly that there was a general sharing session on the concepts. So people had done breakouts, and they were sitting around tables and studying the 12 concepts one by one per table. And then they were doing report backs about the principles of the concepts to the whole assembly. And the people at my table looked at me and said, well, you're new, why don't you take the notes and in our discussion? And they were talking about concept 4 and the right of participation. And somewhere in this, in the reading on the concept, they were talking about what Bill knew about the deep desire in every human and in every alcoholic to belong, and why it was so important to participate in all of what AA had to offer and in practicing the principles and in service, because it met this deep need and deep desire to belong. And that we respect, people when they come to serve because, we respect their desire to belong. And I'm taking the notes. And then little did I know, I was supposed to then go up and do the report back. So I was like, oh, no, I'm not the person to do this. I don't even know I've never heard of a concept before today. Like, this is not good. And they said, you took the notes, go up and read the notes. So I went up there and read them back to the whole assembly. And while I was standing up at the podium, I looked out there and I just thought, well, first of all, these are all the people I see in meetings who have what I want. They're all like in the same place here. And number 2 is they're all talking about these really powerful principles that I didn't know existed and which really are speaking to me right now. And so I sort of asked Kathy what I should do and how to get involved. And, she said, well, you can see if your home group needs an alternate GSR and get started that way. And by that time, I'd changed groups. I remember asking one of my friends named Melody, I said, on account of there being a lot of drama at my home group, I said, I think I might need new friends. And she said, well, why don't you come to this meeting? And I went to that meeting and I started going pretty regularly. And I still went to Chicks at Six, of course, but But anyway, she said, or I went to the home group and said I wanted it to be my home group. And did they have any service positions? And they said, well, we don't have an alternate GSR right now. And I said, well, that's great. I'm willing to do that. And they said, that's great. And then I said, well, what is an alternate GSR? And I found out that the next week that the alternate GSR is the person who becomes the GSR after the GSR quits, which was what happened a week later. So that was my unlikely route to joining into general service. And what I'll say about it is that, and why it's important, I think, to share that is because at every point in my recovery since then, I've never really been able to get away with only working, one of the three triangles at a time. Like, I'm really the type of person who's perhaps so spiritually messy that I really, in order to get to this point of what Bill was talking about here of giving away love for free without depending on anything in return, I really do feel like, the steps, the traditions, and the concepts are all part of animating that for me. So let me talk about what's been going on lately. So when I was about 15 years or 16 years sober, kind of in there, I went through like probably the darkest point in my recovery, which is amazing because if you'd told me when I was a year and a half sober and feeling all this like, this emotional pain and just being a young person who didn't know how to be a grown-up and stuff, what was coming, I don't know. I'm not sure I would have signed up for that. But when I was about 15, 16 years sober, I was serving as the delegate for my area 10 in Colorado. I was working a full-time job that was incredibly demanding and had me traveling more or less 2 or 3 times a month, sometimes per week. And I was married and the marriage was falling apart, in part because of my own, of course, contributions to it, but also in part because it simply became, as they say, irrevocably broken, which I've never really seen 2 words so well describe what happened between us over time. And so, I think the sort of level of kind of psychic pain that was taking place at that point in my life was very intense. And what was really weird about it was that I was also very connected to my higher power. So I was praying, and I was giving away what I had. And yet I just had to go through some rocky stuff. And I'll say one of the most important things that was happening was staying really in touch with my sponsor at that time. And actually kind of withdrawing a little bit from other advisors in AA, because the reality was the stuff I was going through, I actually didn't need a ton of opinions about. As it says in the book, we aren't the arbiters of one another's sex conduct, but as a matter of fact, people do nevertheless try to be the arbiters of other sex conduct. And so I really needed to just be talking to my sponsor, and I really needed to be like passing on what I was learning to my sponsees. And so I was feeling like a total failure at the time. I was not a person who ever imagined myself getting a divorce. In my family, it wasn't viewed as like something you do. And I never thought of myself as someone who would get married and then get divorced. I always thought of myself as like a lifer, like unbelievably loyal and all this stuff. And it just completely shattered my image of that. And so, so what was really amazing about it is because I was serving as the delegate at the time, I got to drive my car all over the state all the time to visit with groups and hear what they were interested in talking about and share what I had experienced at the General Service Conference. And that was time consuming. And I would like put a sponsee in the car with me and we would go together and I would get to hear how my sponsee was doing for hours at a time and things like that. And then I had a sponsee who called me right when kind of things were hitting their kind of final collapse. And she called me and shared with me that she was going through virtually the exact same thing I was going through. Like the circumstances were eerily exactly the same. And she was afraid to tell me about it or tell anyone about it because she was so ashamed and she was feeling like a failure. And so I got to tell her, well, I'm 2 weeks ahead of you. And I can't tell you what you should do. I have no idea. But I will tell you how I stayed sober the past 2 weeks, and that is all I can share. And, it was important because she stayed close, she didn't just cut off and blow away. She stayed close and she worked her program and she made her choices and she took responsibility for what she needed to take responsibility for, instead of just like letting that shame and guilt and everything take her down. So, that was a really powerful thing. It helped me to see how important it is to keep telling the truth and sharing experience, even through really difficult and hard times. And it also showed me so clearly the way that my higher power really wants me to heal, because my higher power heals me through me being able to turn my experience into something that's helpful for other people. It's the only way I've ever healed from anything. And so right there in the mess, like I got a little lifeline from my higher power. And, that's how my higher power and I work. So let's see. Right at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, my grandfather passed away of COVID. It was a terrible, terrible episode. He was a really important person, the patriarch in our family. His wife, my Grammy, who's still living, the matriarch. And he's one of these people who was going to be immortal. He was still working at 91. And he was just at the top of his field, still world-class, everything. And he was going to be teaching a master class to his studio. He was a musician, so he's going to be teaching a master class on Tuesday on Zoom in April of 2020. And on Monday, he went into the emergency room and they put him on a ventilator that afternoon and he was gone by Thursday. So, and my Grammy, his wife also had COVID and had to be in isolation in her assisted living. And she didn't test negative for 3 months. So she mourned him alone for 3 months. And it just felt very unjust, to say the least. These two wonderful people had lived their lives the way they had, and then had to, leave this plane that way and lose one another, And my partner and I now live in Massachusetts. And because of that, we got to step up for my family in a really important way, which was that my grandfather had built a couple of cottages in Western Massachusetts. And my partner and I were asked to go by my mom and her brothers and just check on them because we were the only family in the state. And we went out there and we watched my papi get buried right near them because that's where he wanted to be buried. So we got to go to the burial, just like us and the funeral director and the guy at the graveyard, standing socially distanced in a snowstorm, and just, it was a really weird pandemic burial. My uncle and aunt did get to show up from Philadelphia, but otherwise there was no family there, and it was just real weird, you know. And so my uncle and my mom and her other brother asked Zoe, my partner, and I to like take care of the cottages, because they used to be, everybody would come all summer and stay there as families. So Zoe and I went out during that summer of 2020 and stayed in one of my poppy's cottages that he built. And you know, while we were there, this fellow in my AA group in Cambridge mentioned that he'd been to a bunch of meetings out there, and that there was this amazing little town called Heath nearby, and that Heath was where Reinhold Niebuhr had written the Serenity Prayer in the Heath Union Church. And I just had this thought. I told my partner, let's go to the Heath Union Church on a day trip and just like check it out. It's where Reinhold Niebuhr, you know, first preached the Serenity Prayer. So we drove over there to Heath, and it was like one of the most beautiful places we've ever seen in our entire lives. Like, it's just this perfect, idyllic New England farm town. And while we were driving through, we saw this little really rundown, abandoned farmhouse. And we had realized that summer that we loved having a little cottage with land around it, because where we live in Cambridge, we have an apartment, but we don't have a speck of dirt to our name outside. And this tiny little rundown place was sitting on the corner right at the bottom of the road to the Heath Union Church. And we sort of prayed about it and talked to my parents and family about it, and decided that we would buy it and try to learn how to plant things and grow things to give away. And so we became farmers in like the midst of the pandemic. So it's also kind of like a ridiculous story. It's the type of story that you also probably saw a Netflix documentary about or something. That was not us, but like everybody did it kind of thing. We didn't know that was happening when it was happening. But anyway, so we did get a farm that was built in 1780, and we live with all the little mice and other critters that like to live in our Fieldstone Foundation house. And we started planting. We started planting vegetables and flowers, and making maple syrup in the winter. And then we put out a little farm stand in the front of our house with our stuff, just to see what would happen. And what happened is all these people started pulling over and coming and like buying little produce and bouquets. And one of my favorite motifs is guys in pickup trucks who are driving home after work, who pull over and come over and pick up like the pinkest bouquet they can find on the table. And we started realizing what a joy it was to feed our neighbors. And we'd have people stop by and say, I can't afford, to buy anything, but I was wondering if you would take a trade because I have too many cucumbers, or, too many pieces of chard in my garden or whatever. And would you accept that in exchange for, a bouquet for my mom? And so we started doing this like cooperative stuff with our neighbors. And it started to feel like this piece in Language of the Heart about like just investing in creating something, feeding one's neighbors and asking for nothing in return, because we give the money away. So it's sort of like a very interesting way to honor, my family, and also the recovery that is in this area, and the sort of legacies of people who've been trying to figure out how to heal the world, really. So it's been a really powerful thing, and we collaborate a lot with other farmers in our area, and our closest people are farmers who live about a mile from us. And we just found out last week that our dear friend, who's kind of one of our closest people that we've met in the last couple of years and is like family, has pancreatic cancer. So yeah, that's a pretty big deal in the life of somebody who makes their livelihood farming. Like, you know, even if he makes it, he won't be physically able to do more things, you know, like he won't be able to physically do the things that are needed on his farm. So while he's being treated. So the upshot of that is that they met us and we learned how to do all this stuff in the past couple of years, and we can go up and help with really anything because now we know how to do it. And before we were there, they didn't have a lot of people like us who could contribute in that way. So I guess I'll tell you a little bit about, while I wrap up here, the stuff that I'm struggling with right now, other than just kind of preparing to be side by side with this close friend who needs help and support and love, is that my partner and I are expecting our first child. And she will be joining us in early January. This is a long time coming for me. My ex-wife and I tried to have children and it didn't work out. And my current wife and I have been trying to have children for a while, and miracle of miracles, one of the little embryos decided to stay. And so she'll be joining us in early January. So we're getting very close to that. And I'm really excited about it. I just love little babies and I'm really excited about it. But I'm also like pretty scared about it. I'm scared about all the things I don't know. I have a lot of anxiety about like how much my life is about to change, and whether I'll be okay with those changes, and whether I'll actually react in a way that I think my higher power wants me to. And so, you know, I'm turning a lot of that over. I talked to my sponsor about it, of course. And one of the things that I also noticed that I've been doing over the past few months is just like eating. So I've been definitely, I think that's the thing I've been definitely doing the most in terms of taking my will back. And and so I kind of have come to a point where I'm trying to get willing to be willing to do the things that I need to do around food. A few weeks ago, I got to a little bottom around it, which I felt was a relief. And I started to do a few things differently, like go to another 12-step program and check it out. And, you know, really try to clean up what I was eating on a day-to-day basis. And then, you know, then that kind of faded away. And this is a familiar thing for me. And like, I've had a lot of things that, you know, I was willing and then I wasn't quite willing. And I just know that when it's over, it's over. So I'm asking my higher power for help, willing to be willing. And the one thing I'm doing right is I'm just telling the truth about it, you know, so telling my sponsor about it, talking to my partner about it. I'm not hiding things at all. And it's, you know, humbling. But I also know, just based on all of my experiences in recovery, that first of all, my higher power is going to send me somebody who needs to walk with me through this together. So that'll happen. And then the second thing is just that my higher power will do for me what I can't do for myself 100% of the time. So I'm doing the same stuff. I get up in the mornings, I ask God to keep me sober, provide me with that defense against the first drink just for today. I ask God to do with me what God needs me to do every day. And I just really trust that that prayer gets answered. I don't really sweat it. I just do the prayer, and I trust that my higher power will steer me where my higher power needs me. You know, I try to give it away. And those are the things still going on. And I still have plenty to learn. But I guess I feel I feel like I've got nothing else. So I think, Maggie, I'll stop while I'm ahead. Thanks for listening.
Okay. Oh, thank you so much, Erica. It's wonderful. The way that we do this workshop is we have you call on a few people that you'd like to hear from. And then if anyone wants to share or ask a question, you can use the raise your hand function. And yeah, so yeah, go ahead and you can pick on a few people, Erica.
All right. Judy, let's hear from you first. I haven't heard from you in a while.
Oh, thanks, Erica. Judy Lavezzi, alcoholic. Happy to be here, and especially happy to be here tonight among so many friends and to hear your lovely story. Congratulations, big time on the little. That's just a really big deal. I feel like our little family is going to have a new baby in it. You know, it's like a shared experience. So it's very exciting. And I know there's what you've done and what I think is the part of you telling your story that I always get so much out of is that you've done those things with integrity and you've shown up to do big book studies and prayer groups and all of the things that people talk about doing on a consistent basis. You have a home group and you have a sponsor, but again, you're willing to look at stuff as life happens. And I really get the sense that our life's work seems to be about getting over the story we've got in our head that isn't quite accurate. You know, the story that's in there. And that's like an adult journey that AA really walks us through as we encounter the next thing in life. And there's always a next thing, isn't there? Darn it. And it's always a good thing eventually. Thank God. So I love that part of it. And I've really enjoyed tonight's vision of you as Farmer Erica. It's you've lived lots of lifetimes in your short 42 years. And that's a good thing. Thanks for sharing who you are with everybody. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Judy. Dave Bruni. Oh, sorry, Dave B.
It's all right. That's just fine, Erica. Thanks for sharing your experience, strength, and hope. It's great to see you and hear you, and I'm so excited for you about the little girl coming. That is just awesome, and yeah, I don't have any bio kids, but the learning to love a child has been one of the best things that's happened to me in recovery. And what's just as cool is learning to love my grandchildren. You know, that was even easier. So I'm thrilled for you. I'm excited for you. And thank you again for sharing, Erica. Congratulations.
Thanks, Dave. How about Nancy? Nancy HB.
Thanks, Erica. Hi, I'm Nancy. I'm an alcoholic. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so happy to be here to hear you. I've got to be able to see you at the same time. And I feel a little guilty with all your friends because you live closer, although not really because you're still out in Western Mass a lot. But I'm always moved by your story. I'm always inspired. Even when it's bad news, it's good news. And I've already learned so much from you. I just remember walking around the cold neighborhood, comparing divorce stories. And, you know, you didn't tell my story clearly, but I identified so much with it. And that I love being 12-step by your roommates. My roommates would have gotten rid of me, but, you know, it's a lovely story too. But I just, what you said about, you know, nobody had ever asked me that before. And I can remember saying the wrong thing to the wrong medical professional, because I was always trying to give them enough information to keep me safe, healthy, but not enough to call the DEA. And so it was always that kind of, they'd ask questions and I'd try to answer them cleverly. And they asked me, I don't know, I was filling out this form and I told them that I took painkillers every day. And they said, why do you take painkillers every day? And I said, well, I take painkillers when I have a headache. And they said, so you have a headache every day? And I said, well, I have a headache whenever I drink too much. And as soon as the words were out of my mouth, I knew I had said the wrong thing to the wrong people, but I did not know how to take it back. And the woman said to me, well, I guess you'll deal with that when you want to. And it was an interesting way of opening a door without like ramming me through it. And it was like, suddenly I was really interested in whatever she had to say. It still took me a long time, but to your point, I've had that window of willingness be opened, and then I close it again, and then it opens again, and then I close it again, and then eventually I open it. But I'm a devoted fan, and I don't have much else to say except that I'm really happy to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. I guess, should we just have people volunteer? Maggie, how does it go?
Sure, unless you want to pick on one more person. Otherwise,
Okay,
we'll just open it up.
Yeah, how about Patrick? I haven't seen you in a while. Patrick from Colorado.
Hi, Erica. Good to see you. Thank you for sharing your story. And congratulations on the baby coming, and congratulations on the life change with becoming a farmer. It's a whole different, life than city life and what seems like what you're used to. I saw you in a documentary on TV one time too. It was pretty neat. And I'm like, I know her. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if I missed the topic here, what we're sharing on, but it's really good to see you. It's really good to see that you're still involved in Alcoholics Anonymous as much as you were involved in when I knew you in Denver, and when we would be at the assemblies, and how involved you were then. And like you say, the things that got us sober at the very beginning are still the same things that keep us, spiritually fit and growing today. I find the same thing. Talking to my sponsor every day, working with others, all that stuff is the same stuff that really keeps us going, on a day-to-day basis, and keeps this thing up here at bay, because that's the one that really chews on us. So I don't know, the things that they told me to do in the beginning, if I still do today, it seems to work out all right. And thank you very much for your share. Thanks, Erica.
Thanks, Patrick. So we do have Joanna. You have your hand up. Would you like to share?
Yes, I want to thank you, Erica. What a wonderful chair. I really was inspired by what you had to say. And I really liked what you had to say. And I particularly liked and related to your being genuine and present. And that, to me, what a gift. I mean, that is our recovery in action, so to speak. And I can't ask for anything better than that. And so thank you, thank you, thank you. It's a really pleasure. I don't know you, but I really appreciated your chair, and I've appreciated what you had to. And congratulations on your little girl and on your lifestyle change. I think that's great. And yeah, I do think that this program works. I have a couple of 24 hours, and I probably interpret things a little differently than other people, but it doesn't matter. It's just a bunch of words, and words are imperfect anyways. They don't describe the whole reality. They just describe a little part of it. So it doesn't really matter. You have your words. I might have a little bit different words. Who cares? The point is that I probably do very similar things than you do. I go to meetings. I have a sponsor. I have sponsees. I work the steps every day. I try to live them, not just check them off a list. I mean, that's the kind of stuff we do. And that's the kind of stuff that keeps us connected and keeps us in the middle of the herd, so to speak. So I really thank you for your chair. Thank you for inspiring me. It was great.
Thanks, Joanna. Kate in Akron, would you like to share tonight?
Well, thank you for calling on me. I'm Kate, I'm an alcoholic. Erica, thank you so much. I was so captivated. I just was taking it all in. You know, you're a wonderful, I don't want to say storyteller, it's your life, you're sharing, but you have a wonderful way of presenting everything right from your truth. The way you shared your truth was very moving for me. And there, you know, I so much meant so much to me, so much of what you shared. But the thing about asking God, praying to be willing, you know, I've been sober for quite a few years. And I'm in a pretty challenging situation in my life, you know, kind of a rough time with my husband with Parkinson's. And, you know, it's progressive, and he's at the end, you know, getting towards the end of, anyway, regardless, I sponsor that, you know, and kind of what keeps me going really is my sponsees and my sponsor. And I can't leave him a lot, so I'm home on Zoom meetings. I'd rather be in meetings in person. But this is all about AA and alcohol, staying sober. And I'm doing that, but I am eating a lot, man. I just am like working out. I'm eating my feelings because, yeah, it sucks. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you know, no matter how spiritually fit I am, this is not what this is a rough road right now. This is a rough road. He's got dementia now starting, and it's hard, you know, watch your husband decline. And so I'm eating. And so part of me is like, I don't even give a, you know, I don't even care. I know the healthy foods. I know the vitamin. I know all that, but I don't care. And so then, you know, it's like, oh God, can you make me care? But first I have to care. And, you know, but it was just real interesting the way you said that, you know, please let me give a shit about myself. Because, you know, it's just really hard right now in the whole picture. I'm very excited for your life. The farming, the way things have come together. And now a little precious baby. You know, my girls are now 30 and my son's 40, you know, but I was a nervous new mom, you know, it was a trip, you know, at first it's a journey, you know, and you've got your wonderful wife to go through the journey with, and you've got this group of wonderful people in AA. God, it's a blessing. It's a blessing. I'm very excited for you. And I never heard you before, and I loved hearing you. And I hope to cross paths again sometime. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kate. Kathy P., would you like to unmute?
Thanks, Maggie. Thank you so much, Erica. I want to circle back to the belonging and again, watching your path. And, you know, when we get knocked around by life, either from our own decisions or somebody else's decisions, or however it all works itself out, you know, to stand tall in the who we are and look the world in the eyes, holy smokes, is that hard to do? And watch again, you do that over and over and over again, because what's the alternative? You know, drink is to die. And I remember, gosh, I learned so much with you going through the steps. I think it was maybe the third step we did together. And, and then I started sponsoring you shortly after my brain injury, and you loved that I couldn't remember stuff. And I loved that you loved that. And so we're in my once living room, and now not there. Someday we'll be there again, and holding hands and doing the third step prayer, and just watching you have this evolution. And then you said to me, we were talking about my car accident, and you said to me, but you know, God was there for you in that moment, because you're here to hold my hands to do this third step prayer. And I hadn't seen it like that before. And oh my gosh, I just don't know how. I say this all the time because it's just my truth. I don't know how people get through the life without this type of authentic honesty, loving honesty, sometimes a little, pat on the butt or a kick in the butt. So the sense of belonging and just watching how you kept finding your way. And I don't know if this is inappropriate to share, but I'm going to share it. As you were discovering who you are, your romantic proclivities. Remember we were talking about that. And then you looked at me, he's like, you're telling me I should date girls? I said, well, if that's what you think you want to do, I don't know, try it. It sounds like dating boys wasn't working for you. And I love that. And I love that, sometimes it's just is a simple little thing. And then how we find that belonging, because all we really have to do is to be who we are created to be and be out in the world being all of that. And we wrap ourselves up, and I've watched you do that too. We all do it, wrapped ourselves up in some loop of perfection that we think we're supposed to be, only to see that it's just a mask that doesn't actually keep us belonging. So thank you, my dear friend. I love you so much.
Thank you, Kathy. Liz, would you like to unmute?
Yeah, hi, my name's Liz. I am an alcoholic, grateful to be here, grateful to be sober. Thanks so much, Erica, for your share. I've never heard you before either, and I was riveted listening, and it was great. It was really good to hear you, what you've gone through and how life changes, and now life is going to change for you again. And at 21 years sober, you've got a lot of stuff behind you, so it'll all be okay. I had my son when I was 2 years sober. I was barely sober when I had him. And, I was single and, in the relationship, but, I never, when I found out I was pregnant, I was like, what is happening? I was 34 years old and I didn't have any desire at all, any time in my life to be pregnant or to have a child. And then all of a sudden I'm pregnant. And, of course, I ended up wanting to have this child, but still it was a real life changer for me. And I couldn't believe it. And anyway, I had my kid, and he had a heart condition when he was born, and he almost died. And I gave him up to God when he was 7 days old, when he was going to have his surgery. And, he's 27 years old now and living out in Denver and living his best life out there, smoking a lot of marijuana and doing a lot of things, but, he ended up to be the greatest love of my life, and still is to this very day the love of my life. And I'm so grateful that I had him, and that my entire life changed because I got sober, and then because I got pregnant, and then because I stayed in these rooms throughout his entire life. So thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Liz. Sarah, would you like to unmute?
Hi, everyone. Sarah, alcoholic. Erica, that was just amazing. Throughout your story, you talked about being open to God's will and how that being open to it, it was just like being able to let go and let it happen, and like not fighting it. And that's, I think for me anyway, that's God's grace, is when we recognize it and when we can see how God is working in our lives and be kind of matter of fact about it. It's like, that's a fact of life for me, that God is working in my life. And so I heard a lot of God's grace, and I was just riveted by your story. It was like, oh, I get this. And like I said, the recognition of God's grace. And, when we're willing, God is willing to take us there. But we have to kind of be willing. And I recently took a trip. I saw my family for the first time in 3 years. And when I was when I got to the airport, it was the first time I was not driving myself to the airport. First time I didn't take my car and leave it at the airport. First time ever that I was not going to be renting a car when I got to where I was going. And I got to the airport and I was a minute late to check my bag. And they said it was too big for me to check at the gate. So now I'm standing there going, oh crap. And my friend the gal that had brought me to the airport had left. I mean, she was still in Omaha, so it wasn't hard to get a hold of her, And so I immediately called the airlines, and I don't know, there was just this sense of, ease that I had, that instead of like the panic, oh my God, I'm going to be late. Oh my God, I'm supposed to be on this other plane. And oh my God, instead of all of that, I just said, okay, God, whatever you have planned is what I guess I'm going to be doing today. And it wasn't to get on that plane. So I called the airlines, and this is at 6 o'clock in the morning. They were going to get me on at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And, but I kept just thinking, okay, that I'm confirmed on a flight. If nothing else happens, if I can't get on standby, then I'm confirmed on a flight. And I can hear my husband, rest in peace, saying to me, Sarah, life's an adventure. You know that, you have nothing to worry about. And I could almost hear him saying, Sarah, it's all okay. Like God had a different plan for you today than getting on that plane. And so let's just see what happens. And so that's what I did. And I ended up getting on a plane at 9:30, got into Denver, was there for a couple of hours, got to go to the United Lounge and kick back for a couple of hours, and then got on a plane. And it turned out my sister had a doctor's appointment. It was much easier for her to pick me up in the afternoon. And I'm not renting a car. And my sister is, like, she's just can't wait to pick me up at the airport. She wants to be with me, and like when I rent a car, I take off and go other places too. And she was just thrilled that I was just going to be going with her wherever she wanted to go, and that was cool. And so, but on the second plane I got on from Denver to Sacramento, I'm sitting in the row, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe I'll get this row to myself. I can take a nap. And just as I'm thinking that, these two ladies walk up, and one says to the other one, she says, hey, would you mind sitting by the window this time? I want to sit in the middle. And I'm sitting in the aisle. And so they got in and they sat, and the one sat in the middle. And I'm a conversation starter. So I start talking to these, and she said something about sleeping. And I said, oh, so this is the napping row. And she said, yeah. And it turned out, I don't know where this was coming from, but I know that this was God's plan. The lady sitting next to me in the middle never sits in the middle. So her friend always sits in the middle, and she always sits by the window. But the lady sitting next to me turns out to be a Bethel minister. And after a little while, we'd been on the plane for a little while, we'd kind of dozed off, and then we woke up and about halfway through the flight. And she mentioned something about God. And I said, just blurted out, I said, oh, me and God have a real good thing going. I have a real good relationship with God. And the next thing I know, I'm telling her a lot of things about my husband and my daughter and the things that I'm doing, and seeing my family for the first time in 3 years. And the next thing I know, the three of us are holding hands and praying in the plane. And when we're getting off the plane, by that time, we are the best of friends, and we are hugging. And, if I had gotten all upset and tried to force my will and whatever it was, and if I wasn't willing and open to what was happening, I would have missed that. And that's what I heard from you, Erica, and what you were sharing about, that if we're open and willing, God has lots of great stuff in store for us. And he certainly did for me that day. And then I ended up in California, my bag didn't make it with me, but they delivered it the next day. And so that's all okay too. And it was about that acceptance. Acceptance doesn't necessarily mean I like it, but boy, it sure did turn out to be a real fun trip that way. And because I got out of me and just said, okay, God, whatever, here we go. We're on another adventure. And I appreciate you guys letting me share. And I'm going to pass with that. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Shane, did you want to share?
Oh, sure. I'm Shane. I'm alcoholic. Glad to be here. Thanks for sharing, Erica. I remember when I met you in Boulder, when you were working, you were a volunteer at the intergroup office. When we talked about some of the 12 and 12 stuff, I think we talked about being matched up with someone emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. And when you were sharing, I was thinking about, it says, can we practice these principles in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs? And, you know, when we're engaged in life, stuff happens. And, you know, of course, sometimes I'm a little uncomfortable with things, but it sounds like you put your foot forward on this stuff and, you know, doing the farm thing with like no expectation of getting something out of it, but contributing to the community, you said. And that's a lot of what we're supposed to do. And I tend to can still want outcomes when I give. And I did that with, you know, sponsees, trying to like be buddies. And now I just kind of share from a little more casual, detached, you know, okay, if they take it, they take it. If they don't, they don't. But anyway, it's great to see your accomplishments. You know, I traveled around in early sobriety because I had a medical diagnosis, and I went to beautiful Colorado, and that's when I met all you guys. And I looked, you know, then I moved back to Minnesota, and it's very active there. And I looked up different places I lived and seen your name on the delegate thing in Colorado. I was like, okay, I guess she's doing okay. And it sounds like you still are. So great to see you. Thanks.
Thanks, Shane. Beth in South Dakota, would you like to share tonight?
My name is Beth. I'm an alcoholic. I was just typing in the chat, you know, how much I appreciate, you know, the opportunity to have known you in Boulder, and then all the faces I see in Boulder, you know, on this call, like Stevie and Hope and you know, of course, Jeannie and Dave, and you know, and Judy and Lou, and it just, you know, it's funny when they say you create the fellowship you crave, you know, and the experiences, how like you know, you get to grow up in the program, and that was my experience too. I came in at 21, and it's funny that I came over here. And Percy moved over here, and within the first week, he was just like, you really need to look at your gambling, and oh my God, how humiliating, and how like the willingness to be willing, and the whole like everything you described about the food and checking out a different program, and knowing that God will do for me what I can't do for myself, you know, and just extremely grateful, you know. I mean, I've been fortunate. I have 4 grandkids, and, you know, and I have my kids too, but it's so funny being a grandma and in all the experiences with that. And like, it's just like everything else, you know, it's like when you pray and you check in with God and like direct my thinking and my actions, it's like you just, it's the same thing, you know. You get people that will teach you. You just have to ask questions. And I mean, because you don't get any instructions as a parent, you know, and then you think you're responsible for, as they gotten older, for everything they do. And all I can do is be that, you know, model or whatever. And it was crazy. Every year I've worked as a teacher during Thanksgiving month. It's like Native American month, and people always ask me to share about my culture. So being on the reservation, our culture week looked way different. So we actually went to kill a buffalo yesterday, and the whole praying and the ceremony around it, and walking 3 miles in the snow to where they shot this buffalo. And the crazy thing is, when the buffalo fell, like all the other buffaloes circled around him, like to grieve him. And then the crazy thing is that the buffaloes went to run off, and he got up and ran with them. And I was like, wow. And then they shot him again. And needless to say, we're gonna, you know, we just killed the one, and we used every part, and I'll feed tomorrow, and we'll have a powwow tomorrow. And so it was a whole different world being over on the reservation, living my culture and not just teaching it in Colorado at a Montessori school. So I don't know, I'm just grateful that, you know, I get to show up, and I'm so like everything you shared about your sponsees and you having similar experiences, I've had that too. So I don't know, I'm just really glad to be here, and I really appreciated what you said, and I'm so excited for the baby to come. And anyway, I've shared long enough. I'm just glad to be here and sober and to have been able to hear you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Sam?
Oh my gosh, Erica, what a great share. You know, like I was like, were we separated at birth or something? Did I have a long lost twin? You know, like I got sober, same thing. I've been sober half my life, exact same stuff, gone through a couple marriage and divorces, done a lot of sponsor a lot of guys, have stayed really active, remarried, doing some of the same stuff you're talking about doing. And man, I've just been honestly, it's just the worst habit for years. Like I wake up in the middle of the night and I just crush sugar, like, you know, Reese's or whatever. My wife will have a little bag of Reese's and then I'll like eat them in the middle of the night. We have this little dumpster dog named Monty that she rescued a long time ago, and he wakes me up and we both snack together, you know. And so sometimes we're like, man, I'll give you a carrot, but I'm just going to sit here. I'm not going to eat the Reese's. I'm not going to eat. And I work out every day. I box. I do hot yoga. I do all kind of crazy shit. And I eat like, I mean, I'll watch random super like, you know, strict things with diets. I don't eat till later. I'll, you know, eat only, you know, some kind of light protein and, you know, some wild vegetable. And then that night I'm just crushing whatever's in there. If there's cupcake mix, it doesn't matter. I wake up at 3 a.m, you know, and I'll find peanut butter in the trash can by the toilet, you know, and stuff. And then it's just all peanut butter container. It's disgusting. And I make apologies to my wife and buy her more Reese's. She's like, did you eat my Reese's last night? I'm like, because she sees them in the trash can. I bring back an men's Reese's the next night, and then I eat those. So I've been pitifully and incomprehensibly demoralized when it comes to the late night sugar thing. So I'm hoping that maybe we both get relieved of the bondage of self there. I wanted to give two quick things. One of the things that I thought was so cool is that it's like once I laid down so much of my ambitions and agenda and just kind of put it all on the altar, you know, through getting my ass kicked really bad in certain areas of my life, like, and just started living that day at a time, serve God in the day that I'm in. Like all these new adventures that I never thought would happen opened up, you know, like the farm and all that kind of crazy stuff, like the new related, just stuff that you never thought would happen, you know, like I went and bought this dealership the other day in Chattanooga, which is like 2 hours away from here, great town, you know, like bought this building and I'm going to make it into this thing. And I never even thought, I don't even know where that came from. It was just some inspiration, you know, and I ended up buying the dealership that I started at when I was younger, when I didn't have any money, and just all kind of cool stuff has happened where you're like, God, this is just crazy. And I didn't have to make any of this happen. It just kind of inspiration and this door opened and this went about and all that stuff. And it's just so cool to hear you say that. So thank you. And one little plug before everybody gets off. Next week, Jay Stinnett for Thanksgiving is going to do the workshop. And I know a lot of you know who he is, and he does a lot of AA history stuff. So he said he wanted to have fun, and for me to post this in the chat, there's a link to the stepping stones where Bill and Lois, you know, lived out their last years. And you can register on here, and you can see the original letter he wrote to the guy on emotional sobriety. So he wanted me to post that the week before and tell everybody. It's in the link to the chat, and I look forward to seeing you all Thanksgiving. Erica, thank you so much for a great share. Hope to get to meet you in Colorado soon. Thanks.
Thanks, Sam. So Dawn, did you say that did you want to make an announcement tonight before we close?
Briefly, I thank you for sharing, Eric. I appreciated the hope, and I really think that emotional sobriety shows in how we live and how we show up for our lives as our lives are being done. And the question is, how am I going to show up for it? It sounds to me like you're doing a pretty good job. So thank you for sharing with us. So a couple of things. I posted also all the Dropbox in the chat, and you know, we had shifted off of to the great reality And right after we shifted off, I found this incredible YouTube talk about emotional sobriety. So I put a link to that in the chat also. It's very, very good from a psychologist, AA member out of Pennsylvania. So if you have the time, it's deep. So if you're interested, feel free to look at that, and I'll see y'all next week.
Thanks, Dawn. Erica, any final thoughts before we close? You good?
I'm good. Thanks everybody for your generosity and for being here and sharing your experience too.
Thank you so much. It was really, really lovely to have you here tonight. So the way that we close this meeting is we just take a little moment of silence and go inside and just say the prayer of your choice inside, and then we'll come back and thank the speaker.